lady doing the side face, right?
Oh yeah, the gymnast.
Yeah, and so now it's what are these meme moments? So
I'm a big fan of the I didn't get chosen for the Olympics. Sorry to inform you, I did not get picked for the Olympics meme. It's so dumb, but I am a sucker for people smashing their faces in on Instagram. I just find that very funny. So I'm there for that one.
I like all the memes that have the Turkish the shooting, the guy who won the shooting, where it's they'll show. I tried to send it to you guys the other day, but my phone died right before. But there is one where it's I think it's the person from Japan or from Korea, South Korea, who's super suited up and looks basically like an anime character, and it's like this eloquent work email attached to it, kind of a joke, and then the Turkish guy's email is just THX thanks, and then the bottom is sent from my iPhone. It's just and I think there was a video, I don't speak or understand Turkish, but I think there was a video I found last night where he's reacting to a bunch of those memes and drawings of it.
So it's just this mythos around him that he's is an assassin or whatever. He looks like he works at Lens Crafters.
Exactly. He's Mr. IT. Yeah.
So much like Lanark, going a little bit meta for this episode of the 2-month review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a giant book, talk about it, break it down, have some fun. We are talking about Lanark by Alistair Gray this season, and we're going up to page 517, which gets us through the epilogue, which is probably the part in which this book really gets its reputation from and really breaks open everything that we've come before and changes everything that comes afterwards. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joy Chime Killbox.
Hello.
You are frozen on my screen, Brian. I don't know if it's just my screen, but how are you doing today?
Thank you.
What
doing great. Another, it shouldn't be early, but it just feels early for me for some reason. I guess I'm just getting lazier and lazier.
Oh, there you go. Hey,
such is life.
So which Olympic sport have you become obsessed with?
Obsessed.
Is this a thing that happens?
Well, I don't have cable, so I'm only watching it. I'm only watching the small things that the NBC Sports allows you to see on YouTube, and the editing is atrocious. So a lot of times it's a 1-minute video. And by the time you're getting to the finish of the race, all the pop-up things show up at the very end, so you can't even see the finish. It's really frustrating. But I've been really enjoying. My daughter's into rock climbing, so I've been watching a lot of the women's bouldering and lead climbing. Yeah,
that's cool.
Nice.
Yep.
Kaya Straumanis also joining us. Author, editor, translator. Now you're an author. I want to ask you about your favorite sport, but my thing with that, Brian, I haven't been watching on YouTube, but I was watching on regular, the cable package or Hulu with live channels. So it has USA E maybe and NBC, and it will say we'll be showing 3-on-3 basketball, which is the one I've become obsessed with. And I'll put it on, and it'll be fucking slalom kayaking. It's never what it says it is. It's just madness. And the app doesn't explain. It cannot find one app that has the schedule, the results, and the standings for team sports, and an explanation of how any of that works. There's one app. Every app has a different piece of this. Totally mysterious, and I love it. I'm there for the just grand mystery of what are the Olympics. Kai, you fallen into this thing yet?
By thing, do you mean Olympics?
Yeah, I mean that thing, the hoops. Did you fall into the hoops?
The hoops.
The hoop games.
I mean, to an extent, when it's on and I'm in a room and watching it, I'll watch it. I used to watch it a lot more when I was little. I remember watching it in the summer and just getting really anxious for the swimmers, and also
were you afraid they were going to drown?
No, just getting anxious because it's always so close. And then I also spent a little longer than I should have at whatever age that was trying to figure out the magic of how they made the flags appear and change at the bottom of the pool so fast. Because I didn't understand the CGI of it yet. But I haven't been actively into it, but I am always excited for Latvia's 2-on-2 beach volleyball. Always excited. out. That sucks.
I don't even know that they made it very far. Yeah, I was in that Latvia's 3-on-3 basketball team until I showed you their semifinal match, and then you instantly cursed them.
No, you instantly cursed them. I was minding my own business at the dining room table, and you brought your computer in or your iPad. You're like, look, let's watch. And I sat there because you brought that curse upon this household, my friend. I had not to do with it.
The Olympics ties in perfectly with Lanark because they tried to clean up the Seine River and people are like shitting themselves and dying because they swam in the river. I think that I love this storyline.
Well, did anybody else mark the part where he talks about the rings? The 471 at the bottom of 471. At intervals, one would drop toward a white when the birds are landing, the eagle planes. At intervals, one would drop toward a white canvas square spread before the main grandstand with red, blue, and black target rings painted on it.
No, I did not mark that.
It's like all we're missing is the green one, right? Are there and yellow, green and yellow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, missing 2. So it's like 60% of the Olympics. I mean, 40% of unthank.
Yeah.
So this section, so they're really wait. I think there were 3 parts or 4 parts that we went through this time. There's divorce. Yeah, so we did divorce, the divorce section, Provan, and then the epilogue, and then climax, which the fact that you go from epilogue to climax is genius.
I unfortunately did not reach climax. I'm about 10 pages short.
Saying I was waiting for someone to take that bait and play it up. Well done. 10 pages short of climax.
That's my Olympic sport. I will gold medal on Tundra.
Fair. So
and bad puns.
From as much as you guys read, this is like a tonal shift as a sort of like backdrop for anyone paying attention that might not have read all of this or even just be listening along without reading it. In divorce, Rima leaves our man Lanark for Sludden because he's rich and powerful and can provide for their kid. And he's always boring and serious and like doing the right thing.
Wait, you're speaking of the best part of that section. Or go ahead and do the.
Oh no, we can stay there. Let's stay there. That's the first part. That's chapter 1. Let's stay with the chapters. We can walk through it chapter by chapter. So yeah, best part of divorce.
Rima
also, the mildest divorce ever. It just kind of like.
Rima has the most like beautiful fatal blow ever, where she's like, "You would think I went with him because he's a like far superior lover, but it's not that. Like, I could be okay with a bad lover. You're just really boring." It's like you're really inadequate as a lover, and you're boring. You think I'm with him because he's awesome in bed, but it's actually not that.
It is that, but also
emotional damage.
She says it multiple times, right? Like really hammering.
Oh yeah, she just crushes him. I love it.
And he's like, that's fine, just go. And she's like, but really, let me explain.
You're the most selfish man I know. You're too serious all the time. Like it's all these insults. But once again, not to like jump ahead, but he like at a later point will have a moment where he like essentially like has a vacation of sorts or like a moment with his son. And again, his son's like, are you gonna be mad at me? Are you gonna like beat me? Are you gonna yell at me? And he's like, no, why would I do that? And like carries his son and is like, again, like a good model, good fathering model. Like it's so I'm constantly expecting like some kind of insane abuse and it just never quite happens.
Right? It's like a self-fulfilling or not self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's like everyone else around you is like, are you going to be hysterical? Are you going to freak out again? It's like when people are like, are you mad? And I'm like, no, I just
look like this.
I just look like this. It's just my face. Lanark is actually Eastern European.
Possibly. So yeah, so they get divorced in there. And then what else happens in that section? I mean, the real big one's coming, obviously, but we can build up to it. So divorce, he has the talk with Sludden, and this is the one where they decide like he's going to go to Provan to participate in a summit, essentially, and to present Unthank's case for why they should be like given special treatment by the council, and that the institute, everyone needs to take care of Unthank's shit. That Unthank's like, you know, and getting the shaft, and that they deserve to get like more more better treatment, so on and so forth. And he's been selected to be the politician to go, which is a little bizarre. But he did he did meet Monbato or whatever his name is, and worked with the guy Ozempic. Both names,
Ozempic.
They are Ozempic, whatever. So he gets sent for that. I had one of my favorite lines in here is where Sludden's talking about going to work in Provon, and he's like, and Lanark's like, but my family isn't in danger. They're living with you. They're all fine. And then Sludden starts explaining the greater Unthink region is in danger, not from a typhoid epidemic, though that's probable too.
Yeah.
They've analyzed a sample of the poison. 2 firemen died getting it, and says that it's begun filtering through the Permian layer. As you probably know, the continents, they're not continuous with it, are floating on the super dense mass of molten. And then Lanark is simply, don't blind me with science, Sludden.
Love it.
Don't blind me with science, Sludden. Fuck it. It's like, exactly.
I love all
all
the commentary against science and math in this book too, where they're just like, just stop.
Yeah, just who cares? There is within this too. This is the one in Divorce where like, and this will come up. I didn't cross-check this, but I knew that the epilogue section has all these random plagiarisms, which we'll talk about the plagiarisms in a second. But this is one we're measuring our life with coffee spoons. Isn't that a T.S. Eliot reference? It's on page 464. We hung about sowing our wild oats with the same bohemian crowd, measuring out our life with coffee spoons. And that one is like, I know that's from a poem that I've read somewhere. And I wonder if it's in the plagiarism section.
You said you think it's Eliot?
That's what I thought, but Jailford Proof Rock, yeah, it's Jailford Proof Rock. I've measured out my life with coffee spoons.
And then that is.
And then Eliot does not check back. We'll get to that. But
he also doesn't mention that, or at least not under the author's name in the plagiarisms.
Yeah, he doesn't mention this one.
Interesting.
But this is the first one I was like, oh, I know this is coming. And I wonder I know there's a million of these that you wouldn't miss. Although when we talk about his versions of plagiarism, this is would be a direct one. Whereas there's a lot of other plagiarisms that exist. And I'm excited to talk to you about that, Brian, in particular. But to move through this, I have to say one thing. If Canongate listens to this, or anyone who works on these books, my book is misprinted. Is yours misprinted where 39 and 40 start at the top of the page instead of halfway down, like where they're supposed to, like the other chapters?
No.
Mine's just a crazy misprint.
Ooh.
Yeah, and 40 is like all off too. It starts on like the wrong part. Funny. Mine's old. Brian, are you still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, you're frozen on my screen. Do you have anything else from Divorce that's worth talking about? I mean, everyone should get one. I'm pro that. Like they should be readily available. I mean, over the counter, no questions asked. Just get a divorce whenever you need one. Boom.
It's like a tiny wrist tattoo. Everyone should get one.
If Kamala brings this up as a platform plank for the Democratic Party, I am so far in. I would be
divorce.
There. Yeah, just like over the counter divorce. You need to be able to protect everyone. Everyone's emotional damage.
I mean, I have things marked that we already talked about of like everyone coming at Lanark, and Rima's like, I left, but I would have packed before I left, but I didn't want you to come home and find and like get hysterical. And he's like, when have you ever seen me hysterical? Like, what is wrong? Like all these people.
It feels like he's always hysterical when they're like, "You're gonna go crazy." He's like, "I'm not going crazy." Jesus Christ!
Jesus Christ.
There's a lot of playfulness with the names in this book, and there's one that I wasn't sure about. It's just it's toward the end of Divorce, and it's Mrs. Schitzengram.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah. Like she has 0 vowels in her last name. It's a long last name. I'm just kind of wondering if that's like a joke that Gray is having, or what. I just don't know what the joke is or not. But it's an interesting. So it's the last name that made me wonder. Like, I think I'm missing something here, but I have no idea what it is.
I kept reading as Schnitzelgram. Schnitzelgram.
I like on a 466 at the bottom where the way that credit cards are described initially I thought it was very, very new, like a novelty to describe it. But now looking at it again, I'm like, oh, damn it. That's just how it is at the bottom. A credit card, well, the woman with her accent, but she says a credit card will allow the vehicle to draw energy from your future. So like credit cards draw energy from your future. At first I was like, that's kind of nice. But now I'm like, no, that's just what it is. Like
It's just slavery with extra steps.
You're just using money that you don't have yet, which you need to then bust your ass to get to pay. Oh, damn it. They got me again.
Everything goes back to that Rick and Morty episode. I'm gonna drop in a clip there.
Yeah.
It's always everything the world does.
You're my battery, motherfucker.
You're my battery, motherfucker. Yeah, I this wasn't the one that has the Vonnegut referenced, is it? No, it's the next chapter.
Yeah, there's a few that pop up here.
Yeah, Vonnegut becomes like a huge influence on this book, which that was a left turn for me a little bit. I didn't expect. I mean, I don't know why not, but like Vonnegut to be so heavily and so prominently referenced in the rest of this section, but we'll get there. So yeah, so they get divorced. He's going to go to Proban. He's going to save the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we spend a couple or at least 1 minute discussing or reacting to the assembly program?
Oh, that's in the next chapter. Yeah.
No, it's not, is it?
Yeah. It's
sorry, it is. Sorry. You're right, it is. Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, when I'm done with divorce.
Okay. We can jump ahead to that. I don't have anything else with divorce aside from the fact that like this does set up his hero quest, I suppose, that we've had Duncan do his thing, and then Lanark within his kind of arc is like saves Rima, loses the girl, gets set up to be like the one who goes and presents. He's Aaron Brockovich for Unthank. He's gonna go like convince the council to like save them and be like, look at all this pollution, like come and help us. And that could be his redeeming moment.
Oh my
like,
God, I'm not gonna
save everything, even though he's the one who fucked it all up by telling him to pour everything in the sewer. He can be the one who corrects this mistake, and this is his like setup for his hero moment, right? More or less, possibly.
Oh my God, the Aaron Brockovich of Unthank.
Yeah, what I found really interesting with this, with chapter 40, is like obviously like the book breaks with the epilogue.
Yeah,
like everything like it gets like crazy postmodern. It shatters. Everything gets really weird. But Provan, it becomes so strangely, intensely bureaucratic and bizarre.
Yeah.
Very like if you want to say Kafka-esque, like this is like deliciously Kafka-esque, where it's like, yeah, when we go through the program, like what the hell is this? It's like it's so bizarre and so political and so stinging and so satirical. I think it sets up the epilogue perfectly for us to get ready to have the whole book just break apart.
I'm curious what you're gonna say about the thing, Kaya. To me, it reads like an MLA program.
To me,
so Provan, he gets there. Yes, go.
I just had to laugh because like the just the second day where it's like hour 10 world education debate, 5 hours later lunch.
Yeah,
it's like 5 hours. 5 hours. I cannot.
Well, let's look right before that on page 470. Look at the setup we get before he even arrives, right? The U1 flight from Unthank may proceed to Hepton as planned on beam coordinate 0 flux 0 flux 43 minutes not 7 seconds epsilon blah 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 blah. Right? It sounds like gibberish to me," said Leonard. "Proceed as planned. Repeat as planned. Repeat as planned. Out." There was a click and a silence. He lay thinking of how he kept being pushed into certain actions and how people kept talking to him as though he had planned, them. And then, like later, it's like machines talking to machines. Like this is the entrance into this life-changing, course-changing, societal changing conference, and it's freaking gibberish.
Yeah.
It's lunacy. It's absurd.
And that's like another going back to how he's always like people just being like, don't try to science me or don't try to map me. They're like words, and he's like, too much.
Why am I supposed to understand? Gibberish.
Right, so we have to have some favorite gibberish things on this assembly program. I mean, they're all pretty hilarious.
Like the worst TED conference ever.
Yes.
It's always 5 hours, but yeah, it is. The second day is the one that you were saying. The fourth day has the same thing, Kaya.
Yeah.
An hour 15. We do know from like various things that time doesn't run in a conventional fashion, but nevertheless, every one of these things sounds terrible. Opening speech, Logos into chaos. There's delegate and socio-sophist Odin McTalk analyzes the disastrous impact of literacy on the uneducated.
Yep.
Is JD Vance back again? Like, what are we doing here? Like, it's so great. It's the whole thing is these are very funny and very over the top for the assembly. This is where it is on 473 that Governor Vonnegut of West Atlantis shows up.
Right. Yeah.
Fun. We need to put a pin in 468 because we're going to come back to that. Is him landing? I think we should do it later. But that part's going to come back hard. But yeah, he's there. And then what's funny too is like, just like a conference, they're like, well, we're all received. Now we got to go get drinks at the bar at this party. And he's like, no, I want to like, I just want to not do this. They're like, you need to go to the party. You need to socialize. You need to meet people. Stop. Like, you're going.
Take a load off, Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah, Aaron, chill out. You don't have to be on everyone all the time. Like, some little pollution's okay. I thought that part was fun. I don't know. Is there anything else? There's also that survey line is great. The first recorded aerial survey happened when the mule Gulliver, a plain, reasonable man, was allowed to stand on his feet beside the capital of Lilliput. I thought that was brilliant. Like, that's such a fun, like, little image of like the idea of like an aerial overview of things coming from Gulliver's Travels. Again, a reference of quote unquote plagiarism.
Yeah. Well, I was confused on 473 when he finds out that Ozenfant is the new Lord Monboddo or Monboddo. So that's changed.
Yeah.
And then Lady Monboddo, when he stares at her and goes catalyst, I was like, who the fuck is this?
Okay, so refresh me. I didn't go back to find that, but I marked it and was like, I'm forgetting something.
So it was some other page where I marked it and I was like, oh, so the catalyst is the engineering woman he meets at the Institute cafeteria. And she's like, I think this place is a crock too. And then she's like, I'll leave you. Like, I'll leave with you. I'll learn to like you. And then they go back to her room and he fails to have sex with her. That's who that is.
Right.
So now she is Lady Monboddo.
I was confusing that sequence with being Rima, but Rima's still Dragonhide, Rima at that moment in time, aka a Tolkien creature, as we could have maybe alluded to in an earlier thing, and that he spells out here in a minute. Okay, that's cool, because then later on, I don't know if you got to this section, but in the climax, he's like, hey, baby, you're looking pretty sexy to her. And he's like, we had a good times before. And she's like, get the fuck away from me.
She's like, no, we didn't.
Just leave me alone.
We did not have good times, yeah.
We'll get
to that. I already said I didn't reach climax.
Yeah, you didn't reach climax.
How could you?
Wilkins again? Who is Wilkins?
What?
Wilkins. Is Wilkins from the council? Which council is he from? I have such a hard time with the names in this book and remembering who's who, because I've just been like kind of gliding by with like Lanark's voice driving everything and like things being kind of goofy on the sides, that like remembering which person is which, especially from like 400 pages ago at this point, is like not my forte as we read this book over a 2-month period. I'm sure someone listening to this is like, you idiot. It was like in the last chapter. He's this guy. He's an important person in these last few sections that he constantly wants to talk to Wilkins. Yeah.
I don't know, Brian, I want to know if Brian remembers or not. I thought that I associated him with Gilchrist. So when Lanark goes into that round room where he sees Sledden, I thought Wilkins was also there, but I don't know. Brian, do you remember?
I don't remember what I had for breakfast.
Seriously, I mean, my breakfast, for anyone who wants to peek behind the scenes, is sitting right here, is a giant omelet that I made to share with our guest and Kaya, and it is untouched and it is looking there deliciously next to me, and I'm not eating on camera. And I put aside my breakfast to be here for all of you on time. Yeah, I don't remember who Wilkins was exactly, but he comes up a bunch of times. That's why I clocked it. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else here. I do think that it's interesting on 470 where he says he thought, did I have a sister once? And did we play together on the grassy top of that cliff among the yellow gorse bushes? That also, like, we're going to start to come back to the Duncan parts a little bit heavier in this section, where we talked early on about whether there were like analogs between the two kind of very different areas. And there hasn't been, but in this one, suddenly like a lot of scenes, a lot of places come back. And are very specifically back from the Duncan era, especially the part where he's like a really young boy. So book 1, I guess that would be. Anything else with Provan though? He meets this woman, Libby. And Libby, who he refers to also as the Red Girl, she's like, yo, let's go. She gets a Gaelic coffee instead of an Irish coffee, which props, like, shouts to the Gaels. Good. Then he's like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to go to this thing. She's like, come on, you got to chill. It's just the first day. Like, you don't need to be so serious. And he's like, this is a friendly social reception. Can we just leave this heavy stuff here? And there's going to be such a lot of heavy stuff. Shut up, dear, said the morose man. Wilkins knows all the ropes. You better ask him. Listen, said the Red Girl, I'll take you to Nassler. He knows everything about everything, and he's expecting to see you soon in the epilogue room. He told me so. So, who's Nassler? Our king, in a way, but he's not all that grand, said the Red Girl evasively. It's hard to explain. The morose man guffawed and said, he's a joker. You'll get nothing out of him. And then we enter the epilogue. So I don't know if there's anything you guys want to talk about before you hit the epilogue and shit like totally goes crazy.
I just want to put a quick pin in my marginal note in 474 where Libby is like, let's tuck into the booze instead. There's heaps of it. And in the margin, I wrote, this book makes me want to drink. And then jumping into the epilogue on page 480, where the Nassler is like, I'd offer you a drink, but there's too much intoxication in this book. And I was like, damn it, you got me.
Very, very true.
I thought Provan is very clever on hour 22. They have a Trevor Weems, the Master of Ceremony speech is then, now, and tomorrow, 6 millennia of achievement. So, okay, that's a big speech there.
Mm-hmm. Only 3 hours.
About like Thing of Thanks, and there's a person from Troy. And so in the next chapter, it talks about Troy being a divorce, causing everything to fall apart. The chapter before was called Divorce, and we go to the epilogue where it references Troy and divorce. And so I thought it was really interesting to kind of sneak that in right in the middle.
That is true. These parts, I mean, this book does sort of fold around itself here. So let's do anything else from Provan. Let's do the epilogue. This is where everything falls. So
am I the only one when we got to epilogue? I was imagining that really disappointing scene in The Matrix where he meets the architect. And he like shows him all the screens of this is how it all works. And you're like, oh god, not this.
No, I didn't think of that. But when you say that, it also makes me think of the Wizard of Oz. Like, pay no attention to the man behind the.
That's the one that I thought of too, is Wizard of Oz. I watched The Matrix at a bar a few years ago on mute. Like, it was just on in the background. That movie sucks. Like, everything about that movie sucks.
It's even worse with the sound on.
Holy shit. Like, it's so bad with the sound off. It's like everything's laid bare, and it's like, wow, what were we doing?
Yeah.
Like, and also like we have to go into like the Matrix to like put on cool sunglasses and wear trench coats. Like, what a weird vibe. That movie is fucked. Anyways, okay, so epilogue. We go in the epilogue. He goes into the epilogue room where he meets Nassler. Nassler is the author of this book, which he refers to several times, and is basically like, well, you know, I'm in control of all this. This is my story. I'm the king. I'm writing this. Like you said, your quote, Kaya, was like, oh, there's too much intoxication in this book. And Lanark's like, book? And he's like, I mean, world, whatever. And he's like,
same.
And he sort of explains, like, he will explain basically like, well, here's your kind of like arc. And like, and Lanark's like, you're going to give me a happy ending, right? And he's like, fuck no, I'm going to give you the worst ending possible. He's like, that ending is trite. That ending's been done a million times. Like, you know, be better. And so they have like a little argument. This is bracketed by both footnotes in which a separate voice is criticizing Nassler, the author, and pointing out like how he's like foolish and says like dumb shit and is like, no, this isn't quite right. Like in the Goethe, there's a Goethe thing where he keeps shitting on Gerda, and he's like, the footnote is like, this remark is too ludicrous to require comment here. Like just like this dismissiveness towards Nassler. And then along the sides are a list of plagiarisms. And these plagiarisms take three forms: direct plagiarism, like the measuring ourselves by coffee spoons. And then there's what is the other one? Embedded plagiarism. Stolen words are concealed within the body of a narrative. And then diffuse plagiarism, where scenery, characters, actions, or novel ideas have been stolen without the original words describing them. So he then refers to them amazingly as block plague, implague, and dip plague. I guess that's how you'd say that. And then list, I don't know how many authors with like citing like where they were plagiarized and what type of plagiarism. A lot of them are this diffuse plagiarism, which is what I was alluding to before, where it's like, yeah, that seems like inspired by. So like this plagiarism, the idea of plagiarism here seems also blend into like inspiration or like whatever. And that's why my question is for you, Brian, related to that. But this section does break the book apart, gives you this whole like layout of like the author is there, is reading this, and is like, you know, maybe the problem is that like I started writing this about myself. I wrote these.
Uh-oh.
I'm there. I'm back.
Okay. Yay.
But yeah, so there's that. So who wants to start? Who wants to talk about this section? Their vibes on it. I was sort of modern thing last week and how he was like the exact opposite is about to happen.
What'd you say right before the exact opposite is about to happen?
That Brian talked like how Ella Gray seemed not super into modern.
I love the part where the book breaks apart. Your audio is breaking apart. It ties in perfectly. It's really choppy, unfortunately.
I think I got it. Did you get it, Brian, about Alistair Gray not liking postmodernism or making fun of it?
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where I feel, or I don't know what I feel about his opinions, but I still feel like he likes playing with it, but thinks it's stupid at the same time. I did go right before we started that on 484 going to 485. This idea of a writer or an author being a conjurer.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me, like there's this, I think it was maybe Wallace Stevens. I don't know if I'm going to get the plagiarism correct on this or not. the Wallace Stevens quote of like a poet being the priest of the invisible makes you think of like ghosts or casting spells in some ways, right? And then this idea of like, what do you think everything's made of? And he's like, well, atoms, of course. And he's like, no, it's print. And even before that section before, there's that one of like logos into chaos, words creating chaos, and don't give books to the uneducated because it'll lead to the bad things will happen. No, print. Some words are made of atoms, but yours is made of tiny marks marching in neat lines like armies of insects across pages and pages and pages of white paper. I say these lines are marching, but that is a metaphor. They are perfectly still. They are lifeless. How can they reproduce the movement and noises of the Battle of Borodino, the white whale ramming the ship, the fallen angels of the Flaming Lake? By being read, said Lanark impatiently. Exactly. Your survival as a character and mine as an author depend on seducing a living soul into our printed world and trapping it here long enough for us to steal the imaginative energy which gives us life. To cast a spell over this stranger, I am doing abominable things.
I'm going to make that Open Letters new mission statement, by the way.
The next one, I am prostituting my most sacred memories.
Yes. I'm doing abominable things.
I'm doing abominable things. I don't know if you read this part because it cut in and out, but there's also the footnote to where he says, we are made of atoms, but yours is made of tiny marks. And the footnote is, this is a false antithesis. Printed paper has an atomic structure like anything else. Words would have been a much better term than print, being less definably concrete.
Like the author he's just like backhanding himself.
I love it because it would be like if you wrote this and then you went back to like edit it or like look it over and you're like, God, that's so dumb. That's not right. That's dumb. And he's like sort of like commenting on himself in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I love that part. That
Like
aspect.
we talked about, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, how 410, someone your dog-eared 410 as like the page where everything comes together and is explained. And this also truly at the end of the book, and even the reviews that were mentioned in the introduction, like he's just literally laying it out. He's like, I'm doing it in books 3, 1, 2, 4. And Lanark asks, why not 1, 2, 3, 4? And he just explains it. He's like, I want it to be read in one order, but eventually thought of in another. It's on 483. It's an old device. Homer, Virgil, Milton, Scott Fitzgerald used it. It's like what we've been talking about the last several weeks of like, this is not a foreign setup for a book or a story.
Yeah.
Although then he points out that he's wrong. And he's like, it's like each of these 4 authors mentioned above began a large work in media res, but none of them numbered their divisions out of logical sequence.
Yeah.
Facts again.
Yes.
It's so good. So good. I love this part because I love this shit. I eat this up. I know that people find it kind of annoying when there's like this authorial appearance, but like Nestor is like Alistair kind of, but like corrupted, as you say it. And like the playfulness of like the whole thing, like the idea that you have to read it to stay alive is a very like Flann O'Brien sort of vibe. And Flann O'Brien's like also throughout here. The third policeman is referenced several times, which does have like a footnote area that's talking back to the characters narrating it. And in the third policeman, basically giving this away, spoilers, if you haven't read it, who gives a shit? It's a spoiler. That's like basically the premise of the book. But the main narrator for throughout the book is dead and is in the limbo. So that also like sort of tracks with our unthank ideas. But it does also bring to mind Flann O'Brien's At Swim Two Birds, in which there is a author writing a book about an author whose characters rebel against him and take him over and can like do him damage by scribbling while he's asleep. They write out like all how the ways they want to hurt their author, and the author's like smashed to the ground and run over by like a steamroller. It's like all Bugs Bunny type of stuff. But there is that element to this too, where Lanark's basically like, your endings suck. Like, do a better job. That's very Flann O'Brien like, and that this kind of thing I like how it's executed here. It's like cutesy but not overly cutesy, and also like has like this extensive list of plagiarisms is like phenomenal. Like in a way, it's like such an interesting like reading list. Like if you pulled all this out of like what books to read in relation to Lanark, there's the good number of these are like really great, amazing works. They're interesting because a lot of them are like, there's a number of children's books, like fables or like children's books that he grew up with that like wind their way into here. And then there's like the ones that are made up. And there's a few that seem to be like invented.
This made me think of Rodrigo so much.
Yes, same.
So Mulligan Stew was what, 79, 80, somewhere in there?
82. It's like 80 as well.
Okay. And then this one's right around like 81, 80, somewhere
81.
there. Okay. Interesting.
Mulligan Stew is 79.
Okay. But that idea of like the characters coming alive and like realizing like the work sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I did mark like it's in the next chapter in Climax, but there's a part where he's at a party. This is jumping ahead, but just to tie this in, on 506, he's at a party and he's like, everyone loves him and thinks he's amazing, and he's looking out at the world and he's like, Fox, ecological, first water. I don't usually think in words like these, but they seem appropriate here. And then later on, he's like, Monvato is afraid of me, understandably. The hell with the standings. The top rung is up for grabs. All bets are off. The odds are canceled. It's anybody's ball game. The horses are all drugged. The track is glass. What is happening to my vocabulary? And you're like, dude, this is Mulligan Stew all over again.
Oh, we just got done with this. No.
Like, the author's shoving these weird words into my mouth. What am I doing? I'm out of control.
I wonder if you're a character, do they taste different?
Oh God.
You're like, ugh.
I feel like the humor really takes off in this section too. I mean, there's like so many there's too many gems to count and to reference, unfortunately. But just like little ones, like on 488 on the left side, Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson has not been plagiarized.
It's one of my favorites. And it comes up before then too with Robert Burns. Robert Burns' humane and lyrical rationalism has had no impact upon the formation of this book.
I want to be very clear. I hate these people.
A mere attribution of sources. See also Emerson. Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
Joyce Carey is referenced here from The Horse's Mouth. I have that's part of a trilogy that was published by New York Review Books back when they first started. And I read the first two volumes and loved it. And I never finished this. And it makes me want to go back and read it. I'm pretty sure that's the one that they did. He wrote a couple trilogies, but a few of these ones that pop up, I'm like, oh shit, like that would be great. Like the James Kelman reference makes me want to read James Kelman's books. I really enjoyed this section, even though I didn't read them like, every single word of every single one of these, because a lot of them are a little bit crazy. Like Edgar Allan Poe, chapter 8, paragraph 7, the large and lofty apartment is an impflag from the story of the fall of the House of Usher. Chapter 38, paragraph 16, the 3 long first sentences are impflag of the domain of Arnheim. The substitution of pearly pebbles for alabaster pebbles comes from Poe's other descriptions of water with a pebbly bottom in Eleonora. It's like, okay, that's all great. And that's good for like the kind of research and critical stuff. But those ones are like just there. But then there's like the wild, funny ones, like the Lord Monboddo one itself that seems to explain like a bunch of stuff. The reference to James Burnett, Lord Monboddo, demonstrates the weakness of the fabulous and allegorical part of Lanark. The Institute seems to represent the official body of learning, which began with the ancient priesthoods and Athenian academies, was monopolized by the Catholic Church, and later dispersed among universities and research foundations. But if the council represents government, then the most striking union of council and institute occurred in 1662 when blah, 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 blah. But that first part where he's like, this is the weak element of the allegory, because it's supposed to be this kind of thing. But, I don't know. Like the humbleness in here is super fun. And I think I found that. And I love like the bits where he's like, well, this is true of all these books. Like all these books are the first, there's the Roman book about Aeneas. There's a Jewish book about Moses, the Italian book that's like the Purgatorio or the Divine Comedy, which this is really referencing. You get Don Quixote, you get Adam and Eve. You get the best about Moby Dick that ends with there are no women or children in this book, which is wonderful.
So good. I like like as you're talking about those, I went to look back at footnote 6 because that's one that's frequently referenced, and Brian has it as his tag today. But the part above the second half of footnote 6, where just like the authorial, like he's aping authorial authority, I believe, because he's like, this is on 490 where he's like, I'll give you shall I give you the pretty end, like the ending you want? Imagine that when you leave this room and return to the grand salon, you find that the sun has set, and outside the great windows, a firework display is in progress above the Tuileries garden, like this like beautiful, fantastic authorial. Lanark's like, it's a sports stadium, and the author's basically like, shut up, like stop interrupting me. Like he's like imagining this like grander thing, and Lanark's like, yeah, it's a dump, and the author's like, stop. I'm working on it. Please don't interrupt. Like I kind of like that. I imagine that it's a self-commentary of like you always as a writer are imagining that you're building this beautiful thing, and then it's actually kind of like subpart of what your own imagination.
There's two, and this is what I was saying, where this book kind of folds over itself, because there's a bit where he references where Lanark says a few things have happened, and Nestor's like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
And he's like, well, I have the sketches for those chapters, but they haven't been written yet. So like, more than I do in some regards. And this comes up on 498 with like Sandy. And he's like, what happens to Sandy? And he's like, who's Sandy? My son. And the conjurer stares and said, you have no son. He goes on to explain, like, no, it's born in the cathedral. He's like, impossible. Look here. This is a summary of the 9 or 10 chapters I haven't written yet. If you read it, you'll see there's no time for Rima to have a baby in the cathedral. He goes away too quickly with Sludden. He's like, when you reach the he's like, I don't know. Your time goes too fast for me to estimate.
Yeah.
Which is great, because we kept talking about how the time thing gets wonky, and it gets really wonky even within the author's like, oh shit, I have to give you a son now. Like, we'll speed this all up. Here's like, your son's born, his old Bob. Mm-hmm. The reason I referenced that one page though, to put a pin in, there's also the Thomas Hobbes footnote. That one's an important one too. That sort of like lays out a lot of like what the book is supposed to be. Like everything you're looking for in those themes, or like how to interpret or what like the authorial intent is just laid bare here, and that's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
And I have a question for you, Brian, as an author. But before we do that, there is one section where he says, where'd it go? Where he's like, oh, you saw like God. And he's like, what did he say? And he's like, is, if, is, or whatever. It's on page 481. He's like, you saw part of God, cried the author. How did that happen? Lanark explained. The author was greatly excited. He said, say those words again. Is, then a pause, then is, if, is. If, shouted the author sitting upright. He actually said if. He wasn't simply snarling is all the time. Lanark said, I don't like you saying he like that, which is amazing. But that is back on page 481, or sorry, on 468, which is where he's like looking around, his mind and where is it? His mouth and mind open wide, and the only thought left is the wonder if he, a speck of a speck floating before that large pupil, was seen by it, because he's seeing like this eye. To the left and right of the beach, of pure sand, of pearly pale as the clouds, and a round lake, and its beaches were enclosed by two curving shores, which made the shape of an eye. And Lanark saw that it was an eye, and the feeling which came to him then was too new to have a name. And he says, in an effort to think about something else, he looked up at the stars and looked down again almost at once, and the eye was nearer now. He could only see the stars reflected in the depth. There was a sound like remote thunder or the breathings of wind in his ear. Is, it said. Is, if, is. And then it goes on. So that is there, and is kind of like a folding point between like the authorial epilogue section and then where the book is at that point in time. So like this Provon part hasn't happened yet within the author's writing. But I thought that was interesting. That's really there. And we did, before we came on, like we checked like, what was it? The Kafka one references like chapter 39, last paragraph. The silhouette in the window is from the last paragraph of the trial. That is there. So if you go to chapter 39, that's there. But then like a few pages, the next one down, James Kelman, chapter 47, God's contact and apology, for it is an extended dipthag of the story Acid. There is no chapter 47 in this book. It ends on 44. So some of these are like kind of like jokey, I think. And then some of them are like legitimately really like self-referencing what's in the book.
And all this just makes me more and more confused about the introduction and just the like any review that we've talked about or any confusion, because like he explains it. Like even if you make it to the end of the book, he just explains the game. Like why is it baffling? Why are we baffled?
Really truly not. I do love on 499 where it ends. So he ends and because Lanark leaves and is like, I'm out. And before he leaves, though, there's this important key thing where he walked to the door and heard mumbling under the bedclothes. He said, what? Know a black man named Moulton. I've heard his name. Why? Might be useful. Sudden idea. Probably not. Lanark walked around the painting of the chestnut tree, opened the door, and went out. And then it has like a footnote to that. And it's like, as this epilogue has performed the office of an introduction to the work as a whole, the so-called prologue being no prologue at all, but a separate short story, adding blah, 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 blah. And he goes on to start thanking people. He's like, thanks to Professor Andrew Sykes, James Kelman, blah, blah, blah. And then the part that I love, and what are the compositors employed by Kingsport Press of Kingsport, Tennessee to typeset this bloody book? And I was like, fucking shouts to the typesetter of this like insane section, which can you imagine trying to lay this out and figure out how to make this thing work with like these weird small columns? And like, I mean, it's probably not hard, but in 1981, yeah. There was no like Microsoft Word. There's no InDesign. There's no PageMaker.
Yeah,
those
props to the typesetter for sure.
Super funny to have that in there. So I also love there's one of the headlines. I grabbed the Critic Fights Back as the title for this episode, but another one that would have been great was Faces Facts, Yawns, Regrets. I think it's great. Like that could be a chapter on its own. But again,
I didn't see those until just now.
So like in the earlier section, the top of this of the epilogue has like a bunch of different statements as what goes on that page. A king with a bad constitution
A
encounters
strange girl is underpaid.
a damned conjurer starts lecturing. And it starts with 3 words nobody needs. It's so good. Interminably, there's these two on 486. The conjurer displays erudition, and then 487 interminably. And then the critic fights back interminably. It's so good.
The conjurer scratches, reminisces, faces facts, yawns, regrets.
Yep.
The conjurer plans to kill everyone, but shows strange ignorance. I did not notice those last night.
Those are so funny. I love those.
They're like little candies on top of it. This is great.
So, Brian, 2 questions for you, and then we should I'll summarize climax for us in a minute. But the question for you is like, for this kind of thing, like, how many as a writer do you see this as like? Would you ever be able to list? Like, would you even be able to create this for one of your works in terms of like these kind of plagiarisms that I feel like double as truly as like inspirations or like influences, and less as like specifically like plagiarisms? Do you think you'd be even able to like create something like this, or like how would you feel about like from a writer perspective of like like shedding the kind of illusion of like, you know, individual creativity and being like, here's all these things that I'm kind of cribbing from?
Yeah, I think so. I always like try to describe it as like there's this ecstasy of influence that you have when you're creating stuff, and it ends up being like a conglomerate of maybe some real things that happen, some actual observations, weird thoughts in your heads, something you've read, something you've watched, something, you know, and you put together this conglomerate. Conglomerate's just like a bunch of rocks all like, you know, cemented together. That's my geology expertise on display. But if you're an actual geologist, you can look at like each little separate pebble and know what it is and where that comes from and how it all sticks together. And I think it's similar for your own work that you create. Like, you know, whether like it was explicit or just kind of like you just happen to subconsciously put it in there. I think you have a pretty good idea where most of it comes from, but you usually don't take the time to actually catalog where your stuff's coming from as you're writing it or editing or going through it. But it would be fun to go through and like reference where each image, each line, where you got the idea from and catalog it out. It seems this is almost like a work of insanity to have the to have the discipline to actually put that all down, but it's really fun to see and go back and see how it's made.
But do you think at a certain point you would also start to feel like if you catalog where every idea comes from, don't you think you run the risk of falling into a pit of I'm not at all original because everything is derivative? No,
I mean that's written in Ecclesiastes, like vanity of vanities, there's nothing new under the sun. they were saying like there's no new ideas, what, 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, something like that. So
sure.
Yeah. I beg to differ. Rupi Kaur is like the most original poet ever.
That is true.
Nobody's like, we'll come back to that. But also then, so, do you remember the story of Quentin Rowan, either of you? He used to work at the community bookstore in Park Slope. I knew him when he was a bookseller. He got a deal to write a couple books like that were going to be like mystery thrillers. The first one came out as hardcover, is going to be like a big kind of splashy deal. And an online blogger and book critic, I believe it was Ron Hogan, did this, but it could have been Ed Champion, one of the two, noticed that all these lines sounded familiar and found that like he had taken like, it was like a dozen or more books and plagiarized essentially every single line of his book was a plagiarism from these other works by these other authors. And then basically he's like, well, when I needed like a character to walk across like a yard or whatever, he'd go to a book that he knew and find like that passage and use that phrase for it. So it's like this weird bricolage of plagiarism that's like pure plagiarism and at the same time like creative. It's insane. There's a New Yorker article about it that I have up here that I can't access, but if anyone's interested and can, that's it. And I may have a few details wrong, but I remember this story quite well because it was like both like the big outrage, moral outrage of like plagiarism is bad. He's always been a plagiarist, and looking and finding that he's like, yeah, I became addicted to this. Like I got, a little bit of success for an original poem, And then everyone thought I'd be a writer, and I got nervous, and I started just like cribbing everyone else's better lines than mine. But then at the same time, it's like, dude, that is like a phenomenal task to be able to pull that off in like such in like a way where it's like not computer generated, but like it sounds like he would just go to his bookshelf and be like, this is the part, type it up. Like that's so wild. Like it's impressive.
Yeah, like I once read a line and it's the perfect line. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wondered, like, before we summarize climax, which also lends itself to a million jokes, is
go ahead, you man.
Yeah, I'm gonna mansplain climax in a second. Does this how does this epilogue change? I mean, it sort of changes everything with the texture of the book, but how does it change looking back on it? Does this sort of moment alter the way you think of everything that came before it, or do you just go forward with like, oh, okay, here's a new layer to this onion, and it's gonna kind of change the way I read going forward, but not necessarily looking back?
I think it's super annoying because like I want to go back and reread chapter 6, Mouths, because it's all about, obviously, like there's Jonah, there's Pinocchio, there's Walt Disney, there's like Young, Hobbes, Leviathan. It's like this is all the crap that I throw against the wall here. It's right there in chapter 6. Like, oh man, I gotta go back and read this now and like really actually appreciate everything that's there, because I kind of just powered through it and I missed all the good stuff. So it's like, damn, like you read this and it's like, here, I'll tell you how I made everything, and here are all the references. And it's like, oh crap, I want to go back and know what all the jokes are. I want to know what all the references are. I want to see how you like. So I'm super annoyed because it's a, you know, it's one of these like staggering works of genius, and you know, it's all over my head because it's it's a tidal wave, and I just took a sip from it, you know, and so I want to go back and see what else is there.
Related to that, before you answer, Kaya, there's the plagiarism of Sigmund Freud, and it's like dip flags in every chapter. Only a writer unhealthily obsessed by all of Dr. Freud's psychosexual treatise would stuff a novel with more oral, anal, and respiratory symbols, more Oedipal encounters with pleasure, reality, eros, thanatos substitutes, more recapitulations of the birth trauma than I have space to summarize. And for anyone watching this, there is now a kitten, very small, like 3.5-month-old kitten
named Toast.
Named Toast on the screen. So welcome to the 2-month review family,
yeah.
Toast.
Welcome to the 2-month review family. 2 months of kitten.
So I will mansplain climax really quick because I know you guys didn't all get to it. He goes back to the party and is basically like, oh, Kai, you didn't get an answer though. Did this alter your way of reading the previous parts of the book, or just like
no, it didn't alter the way that, no, I want to say no. I think it was the one prevailing emotion I felt was kind of a validation or gratification of like, yeah, it's not hard literature to read, especially when the author can just put it into such plain English. And so it was more validating for me as a reader than changing my view of the book itself.
Yeah. Interesting.
Big girl.
No, I think that's interesting because it plays like such a strange role, because it does like make you want to go back, but it also like doesn't matter. But it does have a huge impact on going forward. And that's like both like in the scope of how you're thinking about it, but also that all that's part of the book now. Like the texture of the book has changed. Like it went from like that Kafka-esque thing to like that like pastoral description. And then this happens, and like suddenly like that meta level doesn't go away after this. In fact, it's like it's reemphasized in climax a couple times. Like that part that I read where he's like, what are these words? Like, I don't talk this way. And then there's a part where he references like he looks in the sky and for a moment glimpses the ghost of a man scribbling in a bed littered with papers. And so it's just there now. The texture has changed. And that's why I was curious what you guys thought, because like if you go back and reread it, I don't know if like this plagiarism and like the kind of epilogue thing is like super clear anywhere else. But now that it is, it's almost like it's like a linear suddenly meta moment, rather than it's always been this way, which I feel is like how it's usually handled, of like the whole book is now like a construct, and it is talked about that way, but it's not altered until like after that's spoken. Then it's like, okay, now we've hit this point, now we can be meta.
And that's what is it, 483, where he's mentioned that the conjurer is like, I want to have it divided into books 3, 1, 2, and 4. And he says, I want it to be read in one order, but eventually thought of in another. So I guess to your question and to your point, do I have the energy or personally the drive to go back and kind of compare where I've come from? I don't know, but definitely I'm thinking about it differently now. And like,
yeah,
I mean, it would be interesting to go back. Like, I don't know that I have the energy to go back and cross-reference or like cross-read every single plagiarism.
no,
But going through those, like, I do recognize some of the things from what we've read.
yeah, and I think some of them we sort of alluded to or talked about, like some of the bigger ones, the Jonah, all the kind of stuff that's like kind of right there. We never brought up Freud, but like very clearly talked about like those aspects to it.
And that's all just to clarify my my like take on it. Am I reading it differently or not?
Yeah. The so just to give you guys a brief overview of climax for anyone who's listening, because it does end on a cliffhanger. He goes back to the party. He gets served these. He's like, it's like an inverse of the elite, where now he's the only man. All these women are around him, and he's considered to be super famous, and everyone wants to meet him. And they're like, he's like, why am I famous? And like, why, you don't know? Like, quit being silly. And he's like, no, seriously, why am I famous? And like, because you do crazy shit. Like you do the shit that like nobody else does. Like anything can happen when you're around. Like you're breaking all the rules. You smashed a screen in the institute. You made fun of Mountbatten. You wanted to bang his wife. Like all these, like you do crazy stuff. Like who knows what's going to happen when you're around? You're a wild card. And he's like, oh wow, these people like me, and they're all like, you got to dance with me. You got to dance with me. Make my boyfriend jealous. Blah blah. He sees Multan, who's introduced. He comes in. They're like, oh, it's Multan. He's like, oh shit, something about that. Like I need to know this guy. And he goes to talk to him. The guy's basically like, whatever, man, I have no interest in you. Like the Lanark's like, we both have problems. Maybe we can help each other. He's like, no. He's like, yeah. Lanark's like, Greater Unthinkness having trouble with almost everything. Is yours? And he's like, oh, sure. Our plains are overgrazed. Our bush is undercultivated. Our minerals are owned by foreigners. The council sends us airplanes, tanks, and bulldozers. And our revenues go to Elgalanix and Volsat to buy fuel and spare parts to work them. Oh yes, we've got problems. And then like wanders away. And so like that little plant in the epilogue of like, this guy is maybe your way out is just like, oh yeah, our shit's fucked too, man. But like, whatever, I don't need you. So that goes through. Then he like gets he's having these drinks that are called like rainbow. I forget what they're called. They're like rainbow something. And they seem to be like psychedelics. So he starts having like, again, like another one of those like trips similar to the one where he may have killed the person, or like any of the trips that we talked about, like the kind of seemingly LSD based trips. That starts to happen. Things go a little bit wonky. He ends up in in that mountain where they climbed up, and he saw the priest in in book 1 when he was a kid, or saw like that at the top of that hill, who had gone around the side and walked up slowly, whereas he went up the straight part. He sees Alexander. He carries him through the woods to this hill. Alexander's like, I'm going straight up. That's the best way, is just go straight up. And he walks down the side and is like, look at the youth just like plowing ahead, like blah, blah. And he's like, kind of has like a moment of like clarity. And then he wakes up in like a hospital sort of area. He woke up, well, not a hospital. He woke up, it's like Twin Peaksy. He was in a square room with cement floor and tiled walls, like a public laboratory. It seemed large, perhaps because the only furniture was a lavatory pan in one corner without seat or handle to flush it. He lay in the diagonally opposite corner on one part of the floor, raised a foot above the rest, and covered with red linoleum. The door of the place had a metal surface, and he knew it was locked. He had a headache and felt filthy and was sure something dreadful had happened. He pulled the blankets around him and huddled up, biting the thumb knuckle and trying to think. His main feeling was of filth, disorder, and loss. He had lost someone or something, a secret document, a parent, or his self-respect. The past seemed a muddle of memories without sequence, like a confused pile of old photographs. To sort them out, he tried recalling his life from the start, and then like recounts our book up to this moment where he's like, first he'd been a child, then a schoolboy, then his mother died. He became a student. He went to the institute, got mixed up with a woman there, lost his job, went to a badly governed place. His son was born. And then he's like, it had been hard. He gets sent on a mission to some sort of assembly. This had been hard at first, then easy, because he was suddenly a famous man with important papers in his briefcase. Women loved him. He had been granted an unexpected holiday with Sandy. Then something cold had stung his cheek. And then this is where, like, we've never ended on a cliffhanger before, but here we go. His thoughts recoiled from that point like fingers from a scalding plate, but he forced them back to it, and gradually more recent, more depressing memories came to him. So we have no idea where he is or what's going on. And next week's the last week. We end in the penultimate episode literally on a cliffhanger. But when you guys read Climax, there's such good stuff in here that comes from, this is what I'm kind of referring to too. The epilogue changes the way that you read. Like the humor is like way more like funny. Things are like clear that it's like sort of toying with the idea of the author being in charge. There's all these like weird, funny metaphors.
Yeah, I guess we didn't ask you your question back.
Oh, I sort of explained it. I think that like it reads like linear, like it becomes meta after it gets meta. But there's great lines like Kodak being like, they're checking out these women. He's like, see that little tulip watching you over there? Bet you she'd go off like a bomb. Like these like really fucked up funny lines. The whole thing is wonderful. And becomes like more of a Mulligan stew thing. So when you get there, get there. But that's where we are at the end of this week. And actually, if you have any final thoughts and a line, otherwise, obviously, for next week, we're finishing the book. So end it for next week and we'll bang this out. Any final thoughts or line of the week?
I do have a line of the week, and I just want to say that the farther this book has progressed and the further it's progressed, both farther and further, it's more and more fun. No, there's so little book left, and it's like super fun.
That's weird because I think that was my impression, is that I read this, 20 years ago and remember it just being so enjoyable. And then we went back to it. I was like, this isn't the same, but I think it's like that ending leaves you with such a happy place, like where we are now, where it's like the past 3 weeks have been like, this is just like candy. This is wonderful to read. And it's fun. It's funny. It's kind of not goofy, but like, off kilter in the best of ways. And I love it. But like, you're right. Like the beginning parts are like, wait, this is a little jarring. The humor isn't really there. The warmth is kind of missing. It's interesting to see it as like a construction too, of like his growth as a writer, coming to the point where he as a writer can say, here are all the influences. Here is where I am. Could be read as this being his first book too. I don't know. It's just throwing that out there. Brian, your thoughts?
I don't know. It's just like my love life. As soon as it starts to get good, it's over way too soon, I guess.
Well, this isn't my line of the week, but I've heard that young girls prefer older men, but I've never seen it. It's one of the other great lines from the climax. Zang. Okay, final line of the week. Line of the week, Kaya. Or Brian. Brian, you go.
Modern afterworlds are always infernos, never paradisos, presumably because the modern secular imagination is more capable of debasement than exaltation.
Nice. Kaya.
I'm on 471, end of the first paragraph. I liked it because of the sort of melancholy of it. It's like, all my life I've wanted this, yet I seem to know it well. Not the names, no, the names have gone, but I recognize the places. And then these two lines. And if I really lived here once and was happy, how did I lose it? Why am I only returning now?
It's interesting you mention that, because there's a part in Climax where at the beginning of Climax, where he's like, oh, I must have been happy once. Why am I not really happy? I must have been happy. I was happy when Alexander was born, or I must have been, because I ran out and rang this bell. But I don't really remember what that felt like. Like there is like this like regain of happiness vibe throughout there. My favorite is from 484, where Lanark asked Nestor, the author, how will my story end? Catastrophically. The Thaw narrative shows a man dying because he is bad at loving. It is enclosed by your narrative, which shows civilization collapsing for the same reason.
Yeah.
And he's like, thesis statement. There we go.
Yep.
That's it. There's the book in a nutshell. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I had a question. So 487, where he's talking about Faust, right? There's a German book about Faust, an old doctor who grows young by witchcraft. He loves, then neglects a girl who goes mad and kills his baby son. He becomes a banker to the emperor, abducts Helen of Troy, and has another symbolic son who explodes. I clearly did not get far enough in Faust, but like, really? Is that what actually happens?
That too to me was like, wait a second, I don't know if I've read the right Faust.
Yeah,
I don't
like,
know if this
for
is the
real,
one
for
that I'm
real
familiar
life?
with. Brian, we defer to you.
I think that was like a Harry Potter reference, actually.
Even Alex, he's like, she kills the baby brother and the other one explodes. Like, what is this? That is not the part of German literature that I have gotten to.
No. Interesting. So look for that. Anyways, if you're listening to us now, it's been a long episode. We are done here. This is the penultimate one, like I mentioned. So next week we'll be finishing Lanark, same time, same place. If you are also listening, please rate and review us. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button. Always smash the like button. Can't just click it.
Smash and subscribe. You always have to point to the wrong parts of the screen because no one ever remembers where it is.
Well, I don't want to do any of this. This is why we struggle along, because we don't play the pointing games or the smash and like games.
All right, Lanark.
Yeah, I'm too serious, not having any fun, about to get hysterical. See you next week, everyone.
North Korea has more medals than Mexico.